What's up, y'all? It's Trey from Half Street High Heat, and today I'm going to be bringing you the picks that I would make if I had a Hall of Fame ballot. This video might end up being kind of rambly because it is 2 a.m. post New Year's Eve right now, so we'll see how many cuts I have to make. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and get into the rules and the ballot itself, so let's do this. Alright, so here we have the ballot. Basic rules of this ballot are that you can pick up to 10 players to vote for. You can vote for any amount of players up to 10, and any player that receives 75% or more of the vote will be elected into the Hall of Fame. Also, any player that receives 5% or more on the ballot will be able to remain on the ballot the next season if they haven't gotten to the 10-year mark. After a player's been on for 10 years, they will be removed if they are not voted into the Hall of Fame. So with those rules in mind, I'll explain a little bit how I would vote. I'm definitely more of a celebrate more talent than we currently see. So I'm going to vote for 10 players. And I think that, you know, maybe people who are a little bit more elitist than me might stick up their nose at my ballot, but I generally believe that we should be celebrating the great game of baseball as much as we can. And, you know, if there wasn't a limit on this ballot, I'd probably vote for more than 10. So that should tell you kind of where my voting ideas lie. But anyways, I'm going to start with the two players that I think have the best chance to get in this time, Scott Rolen and Todd Helton. Scott Rolen personally is a lock for the Hall of Fame for me because of his consistency. He was just such a consistently great player on both sides of the ball. And I think that's more important at third base than maybe it used to get credit for, especially nowadays. You're seeing guys like, you know, Arenado and Chapman and, you know, other great defenders get their due for being great defenders, and I feel like maybe you didn't see that as much from the third base position before, but I really think Scott Rolen is one of the best from this era. As for Mr. Todd Helton, I really think that the only thing holding him back is the fact that he was a career Rocky. For me, it doesn't matter. I don't care about the Coors effect here because you can look at his away hitting stats, and he was still a really great hitter. His OPS plus in his career was 133, and that's with basically the back half of his career being kind of a wash. I mean, this guy was extremely valuable as a young player up until, you know, the beginning of his 30s, and then he kind of started falling down a little bit. But I mean, you look at these numbers, I mean, Jesus Christ, 2000, he hit 372, 463, 698 for a 1.162 OPS. 163 OPS plus. That's park adjusted, guys. Either way, I think he got kind of discredited because of being a Rocky, but now that Larry Walker's gotten in, I've definitely been seeing a lot more love for Helton because, I mean, these numbers are ridiculous. He had 2 seasons where he had 400 or more total bases in a row, which I believe there's like 3 guys in the history of the game that have done that. So yeah, this guy's a Hall of Famer, and he'll probably make it in. All right, next guy on my ballot is going to be Andrew Jones, probably the best defensive center fielder to ever play baseball. Center field is a very valuable position to have good defense, by the way. It's one of the hardest positions on the field. So the fact that he was also the best at it should pretty much put him in the Hall of Fame conversation already. And then you look at the fact that he was a pretty damn good hitter for most of his career. He just sort of fell off a little earlier than most guys. And I think that's the only thing that's really hurting him, is that maybe the back half of his career wasn't all that great. But I think his time in Atlanta alone is Hall of Fame worthy, and just the fact that he was able to hit for the amount of power that he hit for as a center fielder who is arguably the best ever at the position, easily Hall of Fame territory for me. Okay, next guy on my ballot is going to be Carlos Beltran. You know, I feel like his cheating was a little bit different in the fact that, you know, there's only evidence that he did this in his final season at age, what was he, freaking 38 or something? And he's not technically named as a player that was involved, but it's pretty obvious that he was. But the rest of his career was truly impressive. He's another guy like Andrew Jones who's just an elite defensive center fielder. Not at his level, however, Beltran had the bat, and he had the bat for longer than Andrew Jones had the bat, and he also had the stolen base. He was a pretty good base stealer, very efficient. I believe he was over 80% for his career. I think all that kind of supersedes the blip at the end of his career personally. I can understand people leaving him off and saying he can't be first ballot, but this guy's a Hall of Famer. Let's be honest. He's got the numbers. He's one of the best players on this ballot. So I wasn't willing to override that with the cheating at the end. I mean, they were cheating, but it was a little different than pumping your body full of performance-enhancing drugs, if you get my drift. So that's kind of where I stand. I can understand if you don't agree with that. Okay, next guy I'm going to lock into my ballot is Billy Wagner, the lefty legend. You know, I'm obviously a new age modern baseball guy, so I am more keen to put relievers from the modern age in the Hall of Fame than maybe some other people are. But having said that, Billy Wagner's a Hall of Famer. I don't really see how you can leave him out, considering he is probably the best left-handed relief pitcher ever. And if you are the best ever at something in baseball, I think you might want to, be considered a Hall of Famer. So with a position like reliever where they're so volatile and from year to year anything can happen, you have a guy who was so consistent, so consistently great, not just good, not just average, but great. And he did it throughout his career as a young guy. He did it as an old guy. Maybe had his best season of his career as a 38-year-old. But yeah, 400 saves, if you want to go by counting stats. His career whip is under 1 for a guy. I mean, I know he's a reliever, but he still threw a good amount of innings and has a sub-1 whip. That's pretty damn impressive. His numbers are unbelievable, guys. They're just so ridiculous. He's got to be a Hall of Famer. Okay, so my 6th pick is Jeff Kent. And Jeff Kent's in a weird spot because this is his last year on the ballot. He's the only player who will be off the ballot no matter what happens. Kent will definitely not make the Hall of Fame. And the reason why is because Jeff Kent is a so he does not have many friends among baseball. I don't think the media was particularly interested in him. He wasn't particularly interested in them. And, those are the people who vote on this stuff, guys, the baseball media. So, it can sometimes end up as a popularity contest, and he's already not tracking to be able to make it. And I think that's kind of a shame. I don't think we should be putting personal feelings into this stuff. Then again, I was not involved in those with the media back then or with him, so maybe my opinion would be different if I was having a first-hand experience. But in terms of the numbers, he's not like a surefire lock, but he's probably the best power hitting second baseman ever. I mean, in terms of home runs, he has the most. He won an MVP. He was pretty damn good in the playoffs when they were in the playoffs. And he was a really late bloomer. He didn't even really start hitting until he was 28. So, I mean, in terms of longevity, I think he played into his 40s successly. Yeah, I finally retired at age 40, and yeah, all of his All-Star appearances were after age 30. That's pretty impressive. I think that he has a stronger case than it might seem because of the way the voting kind of works, with people just aren't that into Jeff Kent as a person. And finally, let's get into the steroid guy on my ballot, and that is A-Rod. There are 4 players, I believe, who have steroid implications or are confirmed to have used them on this ballot. It's Pettit, A-Rod, Ramirez, and Gary Sheffield. I left them off my ballot last year as a sort of steroid tax, if you will. I didn't think he deserved to be in first ballot since he was a known cheater. He was caught, he was suspended. But at the end of the day, Alex Rodriguez, regardless of, what chemicals and drugs he was putting into his body, he still had to go out there and play. Quite simply, he's a top 10 player all time. So with other steroid guys on this ballot, like Pettit and Manny Ramirez and Gary Sheffield, those guys, without the roids, without the suspicion, without all that, would be easy Hall of Famers. But because of that, it's harder for me to say definitively that they would have been Hall of Famers without that stuff. With A-Rod, it's pretty obvious that he was the ultimate baseball player. He did it on offense at a position where offense, especially when he came up, was not a huge deal. Did it on defense. He's one of the most efficient defenders at shortstop that has ever played. And then he did it again as a third baseman for 10 more years. So he has 2 Hall of Fame careers in one. And yes, he obviously was caught doing steroids, but I feel like his statistical footprint on this game is too great for me to leave him out of the Hall of Fame. With that in mind, that's why he's on a different level to me than Ramirez or Sheffield or Pettit, who I will be leaving off my votes. Now, if there wasn't a voting limit, I probably would vote all 3 of those guys in. Okay, now I'm gonna get into what is called strategic voting, and these guys aren't, maybe necessarily aren't guys that are gonna get in ever. But if you get 5%, you get to stay on the ballot. I think that there are personally 3 guys right now that I'm gonna pick that would be considered strategic voting, although the first one here, Bobby Abreu, is actually tracking pretty well to, you know, at least have a shot eventually. As for the other 2, probably not. But Bobby Abreu has been getting a lot of additions this year, and I think he should, because, you know, within the sabermetric community and the new wave of baseball, on-base percentage is such a big deal now, and it wasn't as big of a deal when he was playing. But you look at this guy, he had 14 consecutive seasons with an on-base percentage over 350, with 8 of them being over 400. And it goes to show you that the consistency. You know, give credit to these guys who maybe didn't have the crazy peak. Like Bobby Abreu wasn't gonna be an MVP. He never was. But for 15 plus seasons, he was this good at the plate. His plate discipline was this good. He had power, he hit for average. He stole some bases when he was younger. He was a decent defender when he was younger as well. But just that consistency on base, power-wise and average-wise. He wasn't just an on-base guy. He hit for power, he hit for average. I think he definitely deserves to stay on the ballot. Okay, then another guy who was kind of similar in that he didn't have the high peak, but he had the consistency, was Mark Burley. 3.81 ERA, you're like, what? Like, that guy's not good enough to be in the Hall of Fame. But then you remember, he started pitching in the early 2000s when, I don't know if you guys knew this, but there was some juicing going on, you know, wherever they put that stuff, probably in the butts. The run environment was pretty high. Yeah, there's a lot of runs being scored. So despite the fact that he would have, let's see here, like a 4.14 ERA in 2003, he had a 1.12 ERA plus. That was still 12% above average back then. So yeah, the numbers aren't blow you away on the surface, but in terms of consistency, man, he threw 200 innings for 15 straight seasons, and he only had an ERA plus that wasn't average once. That was 2006. He had a rough second half. He's actually an all-star that year, funnily enough. Ended with a 4.99 ERA, easily his worst season. But other than that, this guy was always just he was gonna go out, he was gonna give you innings, he was gonna give you a solid performance, he's gonna give you a chance to win. He had seasons where he threw way over 230 innings. For a guy who came up in the 2000s, you know, when pitch counts are so scrutinized and everything, that's pretty insane to think about. So his volume stats are really what are interesting to me. I don't think in terms of his raw numbers he's a Hall of Famer, but if you add the entirety of his workload and all the innings that he threw, that's really the most important thing. For a modern pitcher to throw this many innings this consistently is something that stands out to me. So I think he deserves to be on the ballot. Maybe not make it in, but he should be on the ballot for a little while at least. And last but not least, my final vote that I think is fun is K-Rod, Francisco Rodriguez. Such an interesting player because he was such a great reliever at such a young age. You know, a lot of times some of those guys that are that young and that good, they try to make him a starter, especially back in the early 2000s. But no, they said, K-Rod, you're a reliever and you're really damn good at it, and he was really damn good at it. For example, you've got his 2004 campaign with the Angels at age 22. He throws 84 innings, 1.82 ERA. 84 innings as a reliever nowadays is a ton. 1.82 ERA, 1.64 FIP. So this was not luck-based. This dude was actually this good. 1 WHIP. He was 4th in the Cy Young vote. He was involved in multiple Cy Young votes. He got 6th in MVP voting one year. That's kind of ridiculous. What the hell happened there? Okay, maybe he should not have been 6th in MVP voting that year, but he was. So that's pretty impressive to get MVP votes as a reliever. And he's another guy, he was really consistent up until he just kind of ran out of gas in his mid-30s. But he was, you know, always going to give you a solid season. He's, in terms of counting stats, he's one of the most impressive closers ever. I believe that he was the fastest closer in terms of age to 400 saves. And then he ended up falling off a little bit. But really impressive reliever that I think needs to get some love. And I think he might get 5%. I think he might. And just to have him on the ballot as kind of a sabermetric friendly reliever pick would be really, really cool. But anyways, that's going to be the end of the video. Let me know what your picks are, why you made them, why you vote the way you would vote if you had a vote. I'm always interested to see that kind of stuff. And obviously I know my votes aren't going to be the same as other people's, and that's what the beauty of this is, but you know, just don't be a guy who doesn't vote for anybody. Okay, if you're looking at this ballot and you don't see one Hall of Famer on here, get your eyes checked. That's all I'm gonna say. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.